Hi everyone, how are you? I hope you're doing really well. Welcome to What the Horror, where this humble horror fan shares her thoughts on horror films past and present. In today's episode, as you may have seen from the title, I am doing a Letterboxd recap and an everything I watched in the month of October. Now, big disclaimer, not an original idea, not mine, not from this brain. I think it originated with Spooky Astronauts, and then other channels like Haunted Hippie and Possessed by Horror have also done them as well. So all credit goes to Emma at Spooky Astronauts. I love the idea, I love Letterboxd, and I also love watching those guys recap what they have watched. So I was quite excited at the thought of doing one of my own. That doesn't mean anybody else is excited for this video. I'm not sure if anybody else is interested in what I watched in the month of October, but we're here, we're giving it a go, and if you guys leave me some feedback and you like it, I will continue doing this as a monthly edition. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work through the list of films that I watched. I have my tablet here. I can't use my phone because my phone is there. I will let you know what star rating I gave each of them, and I'll give each film a little mini review. There are some films on this list obviously that I have watched as research for other What the Horror episodes, and those films I won't go into because they already have their own dedicated episode, but I will let you know which ones they are. So if you're interested in my thoughts on those films, you can go check out their episodes. So in October I watched a total of 17 films, not as many as last October. I decided this year not to do the 31 Days of Halloween. I did do it last year successfully as well. I watched 31 films last October, well 32 actually, because I did do a rewatch of Saw, the original Saw, because why not? I also watched the first season and half of the second season of X-Files, and I watched The Haunting of Bly Manor. But as it went on and the closer I got to 31 days, the more pressure I put on myself to complete it. So this year I decided I would just pick a small handful of films that I wanted to watch in the spooky season to get me in the mood. And I did also watch a couple of non-horror films. I will mention them as we go through because there's only 4 and it is what I watched in October. You may also notice an obvious title missing from this list, and you may say to yourself, Sarah, how can you go through the whole of the spooky season without watching this film? But I watched the original Halloween and Rob Zombie's Halloween in the back end of September for an episode that I released on the 1st of October, where I compared the original to the remake. So although Halloween is not on this list, I consider still watching it for the spooky season. It was right on the edge, right on the cusp there. So the first film I watched in October was Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, released in 1982. Hospital emergency room Dr. Daniel Chalice and Ellie Grimbridge, the daughter of a murder victim, uncover a terrible plot by small-town mask maker Colonel Cochrane, a madman who's planning a Halloween mass murder utilising an ancient Celtic ritual. The ritual involves a boulder stolen from Stonehenge, the use of silver shamrock masks, and a triggering device contained in a television commercial, all designed to kill millions of children. So Halloween 3 was a first time watch for me. I had been looking forward to seeing it, and I'd saved it for the month of October. I know when it first came out it had a very negative reception because it was marketed as a Halloween film. People were expecting Michael Myers and they didn't get him, so they were angry and disappointed. But as the years have gone by, people have been willing to appreciate it on its own merits, and it has developed a bit of a cult following. I'm not a die-hard Halloween fan, so I really don't care that Michael Myers wasn't in it. I found it quite refreshing that it revolved around a different story, even if that story still revolved heavily around the Celtic tradition of Samhain. I thought Tom Atkins was good in it. I liked the little cameo from Jamie Lee Curtis. She was the voice of the phone operator and the tannoy announcer in the town where the Silver Shamrock factory is. I forget its name, but I thought that was nice. And albeit for how little time they spent there, I did like the motel setting, very reminiscent of Psycho and Bates Motel, which is always a good thing. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars on Letterboxd. I had a good time with it, and I think it will definitely be one that I will revisit. Then I watched Sleepy Hollow, released in 1999. This was one that I watched for research purposes. I did a standalone episode on it, comparing the film to the original source material, which is the book The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Other Short Stories. So if you want to know my thoughts on that film, you can go check that episode. But if you want a little heads up, I gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd and a heart. Now, It's probably not a 5-star film, but I love this film so much. I revisit it every October. I just couldn't bring myself to give it anything less than 5 stars. But before you comment that it's not a 5-star film, I know it's not, but I love it anyway. Then I watched The Exorcist 3, released in 1990. Police Lieutenant Kinderman notices similarities between his current murder investigation and the methods used by the Gemini killer who was executed 15 years before. He soon discovers a hospitalised mental patient claiming to be the dead serial killer, but who looks uncannily like a priest Kinderman knew who died during an exorcism. As more bodies are found, Kinderman looks for connections between the two supposedly dead men. The Exorcist 3 is a great film. I really loved this. It was a first-time watch. I watched the original Exorcist for the first time last October. I am very late coming to this franchise. I did skip over the first sequel, the second film in the franchise. I heard nothing but negative things about this, and I just thought, I don't really want to waste my time on it, but I had heard lots of positive things about this. I think people either don't know it exists or they really love it, so I was excited to watch it. Had a really good time with it. I think I would say it is a horror film, but at times it also feels like a psychological cop thriller. I think if you're into films like Seven or Along Came a Spider, you would enjoy this, but when it does do the horror elements, it really is effective. This film has to have, hands down, one of the most amazing jump scares I've ever seen in cinema. And if I was going to recommend this film for any reason, well, there would be 2 reasons. The first one would be for this jump scare alone. Honestly, it's worth it for that scene. And the other one would be for the performance of Brad Dourif. Now, this film has 2 different versions. It has the director's cut and the theatrical cut. I'll be honest, I can't remember which one I watched. I think I watched the theatrical cut, but one of them, Brad Dourif doesn't appear in it as much. He does have more screen time in the other one, and I would say that he is definitely one of the best performances in the film. He was, unnerving at times and just, really captivating when he was on the screen. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this one. I gave it 4 stars and a heart. I will definitely be rewatching it. Next, I watched Trick or Treat, released in 2007. This was another film that I watched for research purposes, so it does have its own standalone episode. It's where I look into the real life legends and traditions of the film that inspired the stories behind it. So again, if you're interested in my thoughts, you can go watch that episode. I found it really interesting to research, so maybe you would find it interesting looking at the history behind Halloween and all the traditions. I gave it on Letterboxd 4 stars and a heart. It's definitely a classic rewatch for me in October. I just think the visuals and aesthetic of it is just perfect to get you in that spooky mood. So yeah, 4 stars and a heart. Okay, then we get to the 16th of October, where I watched a total of 4 films. The first one I watched was Till Death, starring Megan Fox, and released earlier this year in 2021. Emma is stuck in a stale marriage to Mark and is surprised when he whisks her away to their secluded lake house for a romantic evening on their 10th anniversary. But everything changes the next morning when she finds herself handcuffed to Mark's dead body. Trapped and isolated in the dead of winter, Emma learns this is only the beginning of Mark's twisted plan, and to survive, she must fight the hired killers coming to finish her off. So Till Death seems to be a bit of a middle-of-the-road film. Looking at other reviews on it on Letterboxd, it doesn't have too many high stars. But for me, I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. I think, it's not the strongest film. It's not perfect. But what I appreciated most about it is that it's definitely a show me film rather than tell me. And I think films these days often spoon feed a lot of information to their audience, whereas this one it showed you it. I mean, the way that they portray Mark as a controlling husband is very nicely done. And then I enjoyed, as I noticed within the scenes, there's lots of different information, little hidden things that show you the level of effort that Mark has gone to in his plan for Emma. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars and a heart. 3 stars because it's probably just above average. It's not 2.5, it's not average, it's a bit better than okay, but I gave it a heart because I did enjoy it, and it's really nice to see Megan Fox back in horror, so we want more of that, please. Next, I watched Baby Driver, released in 2017. Baby, a music-loving orphan, also happens to be the prodigiously talented go-to getaway driver for heist mastermind Doc. With the perfect soundtrack picked out for each and every job, Baby ensures Doc's violent bank-robbing cronies, including Buddy, Bats and Darling, get in and out of Dodge before it's too late. He's not in it for the long haul though, hoping to nail one last job before riding off into the sunset with beautiful diner waitress Deborah. Easier said than done. This movie. Okay. One thing you will come to learn about me if you follow me on my channel is that I absolutely love the work of Edgar Wright, especially when he teams up with longtime friend Simon Pegg. I mean, Edgar Wright, he's one of my favourite film creators. Hot Fuzz from his Cornetto trilogy is one of my favourite films of all time. In fact, it's probably my favourite non-horror film of all time, alongside Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. I love everything about his filmmaking. I love the kinetic energy. I love the creative way that he can make the most everyday and mundane situation and scene so exciting, whether it's a commute to a small town village or whether it's a coffee run, and his music choices are always inspired. And so when it came to this film, I was really looking forward to it. I was really excited. I expected to love it on the level of Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. But on initial viewing, it didn't quite deliver what I was hoping for. But note the word initial. I do love the idea for it. I love that he had this idea about a decade, maybe more, before the film came out. He had this image of a getaway driver in a car dancing to a song. And he actually directed a music video in 2002 for Mint Royal. I think their song was called The Blue Song or Blue Song. And it starred Julian Barrett and Noel Fielding and Nick Frost. And he used that image of the getaway driver just dancing to a song in the car. And then Baby Driver is actually, the whole film is just built around this image that he had. And that opening scene where Baby dances in the car to the song, and then the chase scene, and then Baby walking to do the coffee run, they are all written and shot and edited to absolute perfection. That is the Edgar Wright that I know and love. And then after that, I just felt like it lost something. It just didn't deliver. But then, after I'd watched it, does this ever happen to you? Is it just me? Sometimes I watch a film and I think, yeah, I had a good time, great, let's move on. But then I become weirdly obsessed with it and I can't stop thinking about it. It's happened with a couple of films where I've actually liked it more than I thought I did on initial viewing, and I just have to give it time and let it process through my brain. And that happened with Baby Driver. I couldn't stop listening to the soundtrack and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I think actually with hindsight the film probably delivered more than I thought. I originally gave it 3.5 stars and a heart, but now if I was going to review it, I think with hindsight, I would probably have to give it 4 or 4.5. It is still an incredible film. It is still incredibly well made. It's a fun time. You'll love it if you love action films. You'll love it if you are a music lover. So yeah, long story short, I gave it 3.5 stars. It should probably be 4 or 4.5, and I would recommend it. Okay, then I watched Bill and Ted Face the Music, released in 2020. The ruler of the future tells best friends Bill and Ted they must compose a new song to save life as we know it. But instead of writing it, they decide to travel through time to steal it from their older selves. Meanwhile, their younger daughters devise their own musical scheme to help their fathers bring harmony to the universe. So I'm quite proud of myself actually. This month I did quite well with watching a lot of films for the first time. Out of the whole 17 films that I watched, there's only 4 of them that were a rewatch, and I am a sucker for a rewatch. I will rewatch films to death, guilt-free. Apart from that little niggly voice in the back of your head that goes, you could be watching new material, you should try new things. But I love a rewatch. So yeah, 4 out of 17 is not bad. And like I said, Bill and Ted was a first time view. I love Bill and Ted, especially the first one. And I had been looking forward to seeing this. I can't believe it took me a whole year to get around to it, but there we go. There's, so many films and only so much time in the day. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars and a heart because I had a good time, but like I said with Till Death, it was 3 stars because it was probably only just above average. I won't spoil it, but I wasn't on board with the route that they went with the legend. I could see where they were going. It was very clearly signposted, neon signs, big flashing things of this is what we're going to do now. And I wasn't a big fan, but I didn't hate it. It was just a bit meh. But having said that, whether it is just above average and whether I liked the way they went with the legend, there's just something so infectious about the optimism and the joy for life that Bill and Ted have. And I think sometimes, that's the kind of film we need. Those are the kind of characters we need. So I would recommend it, but for me, it was just 3 stars and a heart. Okay, I do apologise if I look like I'm framed slightly differently or if the light is different, but my battery was dying, so I actually had to go for a few minutes to charge that up, but we're back, we're continuing with the list. So the final film that I watched on the 16th was Halloween Kills, which was released last month in October. I did do a standalone episode for that, reviewing it, so if you want to know my thoughts on it, you can go over and watch that. On Letterboxd, however, I gave it 2 stars. Okay, then the next film that I watched was What Lies Beneath, released in 2000. It has been a year since Dr. Norman Spencer betrayed his beautiful wife Claire. But with Claire oblivious to the truth, Norman's life and marriage seem so perfect that when Claire tells him of hearing mysterious voices and seeing a young woman's image in their home, he dismisses her terror as delusional. Claire moves closer to the truth, and it becomes clear that this apparition will not be dismissed and has come back for Dr. Spencer and his beautiful wife. So What Lies Beneath was one of the 4 rewatches that I watched this month. I originally watched it when it came out in 2000, or at least around that time. I enjoyed it, and then I saw that Star on Disney Plus had added it to their catalogue, and I was curious to see how well it had aged, not expecting too much from it, but I was wrong. This is a good film. I think that it has a very Hitchcockian style to it. There's lots of mystery and intrigue and twists and turns that keeps the audience guessing, and then the horror elements to it, because it is actually a ghost story, and they're quite effective. I thought that some scenes were actually quite spooky, and I think that Michelle Pfeiffer in the lead role does a really good job. She's a strong leading lady. My only negative with the film is that it runs far longer than it needs to. You could cut off 15 minutes, maybe even half an hour. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars and a heart, and I would definitely recommend it. Next, I watched Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, released in 1995, and with this viewing, I have finally watched every single film in the Halloween franchise. Set 6 years after the events of Halloween 5, The Curse of Michael Myers marks the return of the seemingly indestructible masked murderer who is targeting Tommy Doyle, a young man tied into the legacy of the killer and his connections with the Strode family. As the supernatural elements of Michael's macabre abilities are explored, his long-time adversary Dr. Sam Loomis is also back in yet another attempt to stop the psychopath's brutal rampages. Okay, so I went into Halloween 6 expecting nothing. Zilch. Zero. No expectations for either a good film or to enjoy it. But I wanted to complete the franchise, so I gave it a go. And I think because I had such low expectations of this film, that's why I actually had quite a fun time with it. Honestly, I don't think it is either a good film or a well-made film. The plot has so many holes in it, you need climbing gauges to navigate through, and what is with the ears on the Michael Myers mask, and the dad, the Strode dad, is a piece of garbage, and some of his scenes were uncomfortable to watch. He makes my skin crawl, but he is paid in kind for his charming behaviour, so swings and roundabouts. I gave this film 2.5 stars and a heart. 2.5 stars because it is a steaming pile of mess, and I gave it a heart because I had a fun time with it. And in my review, I said that this film was so wonderfully 90s and bonkers that I may actually love it. Another non-horror film, this is the 3rd one of the 4 that I watched. I watched Free Guy, released earlier this year in 2021. When a bank teller discovers he's actually a background player in an open-world video game, he decides to become the hero of his own story, one that he can rewrite himself. In a world where there's no limits, he's determined to save the day his way before it's too late and maybe find a little romance with the coder who conceived him. So Free Guy was another first time watch for me. I'd quite fancied seeing it since it came out. I enjoyed all the gaming references within it, and I think that it was just sweet enough and hopeful enough that I loved it. I really enjoyed watching it, and I was even willing to forgive the cheesy Hollywood moments within it. I gave it 4 stars and a heart. In my review, I said Ryan Reynolds' sweet leading man, cameos from Dwayne Johnson, Hugh Jackman and John Krasinski, Joe Keery's hair, Mariah Carey's fantasy, Taika Waititi's villain and Chris Captain America Evans swearing are just a few of the reasons to watch this wonderfully fun film. Enough said. Then we're jumping back into horror. The next film I watched was Hellfest, released in 2018. On Halloween night, 3 young women and their respective boyfriends head to Hellfest, a ghoulish travelling carnival that features a labyrinth of rides, games and mazes. They soon face a bloody night of terror when a masked serial killer turns the horror theme park into his own personal playground. So Hellfest is yet another first time watch for me. I have known of its existence, and I've heard quite good things about it being a good spooky season watch, so I thought it would be a good choice. And at first I did enjoy it. I liked the Halloween Fright Night aesthetic. I thought the set that they built for it was fantastic. Tony Todd, obviously a good addition. And even the generic teens weren't that bad. They weren't really unlikable. But as the film progressed, so did my anxiety. Now, this is a me thing and not a Hellfest thing. This will not be the case for everybody, but I hate feeling trapped. And there are so many times within this film where a character is trapped in a maze or a scare room or a guillotine. And this was not a fun time for me. The second half of the film became quite unpleasant to watch for me. But having said that, I would still recommend it. I would still say, yeah, check it out. It is a good film to watch to get you in the mood for Halloween and the spooky season, especially if you live in America and you can visit all these Fright Nights and events and things like that. But for me, I gave it 2.5 stars. But that is only because like I said, at times it was just uncomfortable viewing for me personally. So I'm probably not going to revisit this. Probably. Maybe. Probably not. Okay, next I watched Black Swan, released in 2010. Nina is a ballerina whose passion for the dance rules every facet of her life. When the company's artistic director decides to replace his prima ballerina for the opening production of Swan Lake, Nina is his first choice. However, she has competition in newcomer Lily. While Nina is perfect for the role of the White Swan, Lily personifies the Black Swan. As rivalry between the two dancers transforms into a twisted friendship, Nina's dark side begins to emerge. So Black Swan is directed by Darren Aronofsky, who also directed Mother and Requiem for a Dream. So if you haven't seen Black Swan, but you've seen one of those, that will probably give you a clue as to what type of film it is. This is an incredibly well-made film. It is visually beautiful, and the 2 leading ladies do such a good job. Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis, absolutely brilliant. It has some quite gnarly body horror in it, which I was not expecting in the slightest, and some of the scenes are genuinely terrifying. I would say though that it's quite a hard watch. It deals with some pretty dark subjects. Some of them are dealt with much more subtly than others, but they're there. And so I gave the film 4 stars. I think it is an incredible film, but I'm unlikely to revisit it anytime soon. Next, I watched the new Candyman, released earlier this year in 2021. Again, this was for research purposes, and the Candyman has its own review episode, so if you want to know my thoughts on that, you can watch that episode. On Letterboxd, I gave it 3 stars. So the final non-horror film that I watched in October was The Suicide Squad, released earlier this year in 2021. The government sends the most dangerous supervillains in the world, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, King Shark, Harley Quinn and others, to the remote, enemy-infused island of Corto Maltese. Armed with high-tech weapons, they trek through the dangerous jungle on a search and destroy mission, with only Colonel Rick Flag on the ground to make them behave. So I was really looking forward to The Suicide Squad. I am a big fan of superhero films, big fan of action films, big fan of Idris Elba, big fan of Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, and the fact that they had Sylvester Stallone voicing King Shark, That alone was reason enough for me to watch this film. So this film ticked all the boxes and I was happy with it. I enjoyed it, and I think where the first Suicide Squad film failed, this one succeeds. It has some good humour. It has moments that genuinely tug at the heart, and I think that it has some strong character development. The gore though, woo! It took me by surprise, but I suppose this is the world of, post-Deadpool, where the superhero films can go a lot darker or a lot further, I suppose, in extremities. I gave it 4 stars and a heart. I thoroughly enjoyed it and would definitely recommend it. Oh man, okay. Next, I watched There's Someone in Your House, released this year in 2021. Makani Young has moved from Hawaii to quiet small-town Nebraska to live with her grandmother and finish her final year of high school. But as the countdown to graduation begins, she and her classmates are stalked by a killer intent on exposing their darkest secrets to the entire town, terrorizing every victim while wearing a lifelike mask of their own face. With a mysterious past of her own, Makani and her friends must discover the killer's identity before they become victims themselves. So There's Someone in Your House was released earlier this year in 2021 and was dropped on Netflix. And one of the production companies behind it is James Wan's Atomic Monster. I thought, great, I'll give this a try. Lots of people in the horror community are checking it out. It's a new slasher. Let's give it a whirl. Oh, man, I did not like this film. This is not a great film, and I hate to dump on movies because I always try to find a positive within them, reminding myself that this is somebody's creation. Somebody probably put their heart and soul into it, and also, if I'm dumping on this movie, this could be someone else's favourite film that just really means a lot to them. But I didn't like this film. At first, I didn't like it, even though I was quite excited by the Scream-esque opening scene. It was the painful dialogue that took away any enjoyment from that. Then I was bored. Then I kind of quite liked it. If nothing else, it had some nice visuals. There's some nice scenes in a cornfield. Then I checked out because I figured out who the killer was. And then I strained the muscles in my eyes from rolling them so hard at the predictable, cheesy ending. I gave this film 2 stars, and I will not be rewatching it. Okay, and the last film that I watched in October was It Chapter 2, released in 2019. Defeated by members of the Losers Club, the evil clown Pennywise returns 27 years later to terrorise the town of Derry, Maine once again. Now adults, the childhood friends have long since gone their separate ways, but when people start disappearing, Mike Hanlon calls the others home for one final stand. Damaged by scars from the past, the united losers must conquer their deepest fears to destroy the shape-shifting Pennywise, now more powerful than ever. So much better to go out on a positive note than a negative note. I don't want to be a negative Nelly. But having said that, I do understand that It Chapter 2, not for everyone. I know it disappointed a lot of fans when it came out, and I think that is because It Chapter 1 was so phenomenally good that it set a certain bar of expectation from the fans, because we knew it was in capable hands, we knew it's the same team, the same actors, and then maybe It Chapter 2 just didn't quite deliver, on those expectations. Myself included, I didn't think it was as good as It Chapter 1. I did enjoy it. I had a good time with it in the cinema, and I cried a lot. In my Letterboxd review, I said that this film gets better with every watch. I'm no longer wanting it to be the movie I hoped for, and now I'm just enjoying it for the movie it is. And I stand by that. I think that if you remove your own expectations from it and just watch it on its own merits, this is a good film. If this is the weakest out of the 2, but this is the worst that it gets, that's pretty good. There are some really bad sequels out there, and I think that this is not one of them. Yes, there's a high use of CGI, and I do think that practical is better than CGI, but it still has all the humour and all the beauty and all the heart that It Chapter 1 had. This is a visually beautiful film. It's scored incredibly well. I still think the musical score is achingly heartbreaking. The casting of the adults is phenomenal. This is my 3rd or 4th time watching this now, and it's still amazing me what a good job that they did with some of them. It's eerie how good it is. I think for me personally, the weakest is probably James McAvoy, only because it's like watching James McAvoy in a film, but he's a very good actor and he still acts his heart out. So again, if that's the worst one, that's really not bad. I gave it 4 stars and a heart, and I would recommend it to anybody, even those who have watched it and said, nah, I write it off. But I am probably biased because I do love it and I do love The Losers Club. The Losers Club have my heart and soul, and I want to be part of The Losers Club. So yeah, I probably am biased, but there we go. For me, 4 stars and a heart. Okay, so that is everything that I watched in the month of October. I hope you enjoyed this video. Perhaps you found some ideas or inspiration of films that you would like to watch yourself. If this video is a success, I will definitely make this a monthly edition. In the meantime, thank you for stopping by as always. I appreciate each and every one of you. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye, guys. Long story short, just waffled on for an hour.